So the new Peter Pan and Wendy trailer has been released, and despite what you think about the movie or what it's teasing and what this film's going to be about and the vibe is going to be like, it does present a very interesting cinematography style. And so today I'm going to be reacting to specific shots in this trailer and give my thoughts analyzing the look of them, the choices creatively. So let's go ahead and get into it. A lot of people have different opinions about their thoughts on this upcoming Peter Pan film, and we've seen so many different Peter Pan movies. But if we kind of brush all that aside and save that for different videos, I would simply like to take this trailer and say, let's look at the cinematography, let's look at the creative choices that was made on set with the actors, the creatives that were, behind the camera, and figure out what are some of the choices they made. Let's analyze shots. So let's go ahead and jump into this first one.
How did you come to know?
This is close to the beginning of the trailer, and it's really interesting. A common thread through this whole trailer, this whole narrative, I'm thinking the whole film, is that you have this wide angle lens. It's showing environments, whether it's a close-up on a character, a whole environment, a few characters in the frame. You get this real wide kind of fisheye look. And we saw that in The Revenant. We saw that, I think, in Birdman. There's a couple different directors of photography that use this method as their personal style of choice. Now, I don't think it was very reminiscent of what the director of photography for this film is doing, or even the director for this film is doing, but I see little hints here and there. So with this shot, it was very interesting because they chose to center Wendy here on the beach, and that's always a framing choice. But what I thought was cool, especially if this is shot on scene, and not done digitally or this part of like CGI later, but the clouds are shaped in such a way to create leading lines to where Wendy is sitting. So if you notice the clouds, and this could be the kind of lens they chose, kind of creates a U, and they're kind of pointing towards the center. And it kind of is bringing your eye line to the center, which creates the line, the frame down where Wendy's at. So although they're not pointing directly at Wendy, they are bringing your attention to the center of the frame. And I think it's just unique. The frame is split in half with the horizon, and that's pretty common when you see that in composition. But and it's well balanced because you have Wendy here in the center, you have a little rock here, and you have another little rock cliffside over here. So you have bop, bop, and bop. So it's well balanced, 1, 2, 3. So compositionally, it's unique, it's simple, but it's done well. Let's move on to the next one. But what I thought was interesting about this frame is specifically the choice of lighting and using the sun to backlight the scene. Now, the problem with that is you need a lot of dynamic range in your camera sensor in your camera so it doesn't completely get lost, because a lot of times the sky will just be blown out. But we have color, we have like a blue in the sky, and so we're not losing that detail. So it was done very well, but we also see the shadows clearly, and it's actually being backlit by the sun over here, which is unique. A lot of people don't want to put the sun in the frame because it's really harsh, that's really difficult to work with, but they're using the sun as the main light source to backlight these characters while revealing just enough of the shadows to still see the details from these characters, even though the sun is behind them. And I actually saw that a couple times throughout this trailer, using the sun as a backlight and also as the main source of light for the scene. And it's also motivated because it shows us where the light is coming from. They could have easily not showed the sun and we still got the idea, but they chose to show the sun, which is always a good option to show where your light source is coming from.
What is this place? It's home.
Peter found it.
The next shot is interesting. This is very reminiscent of the director that he also worked on The Green Knight that came out, I believe, last year or 2 years ago. Very similar styles here, but this was also an interesting take for framing. Again, we have Wendy centered, similar to that first beach shot. So the focus is on the center, but we have different layers. We have, you know, these bushes here that's kind of next to Wendy. We have this archway that is like creating this beautiful kind of frame around her. And then we have this background that we can still see the details. They didn't choose to make the depth of field very shallow. They actually chose to keep it pretty open so you can see the environment very clearly and all of these textures and colors of this little environment that they're in. It's shooting slightly up towards her, like it's angled looking up, and we see that a lot in most of the shots from the trailer. So I'm not sure, that usually represents authority. So I don't know if that is the case for this shot, but it's the choice they went with. This is interesting because I saw this as, you know, it's creating leading lines with your characters and extensions of their characters. And I'll show you, there's a couple more in here as well that show this style. But basically, his sword, Peter's sword, is off frame. Like a bigger section that's closer to us is off frame. It takes you to the edge of the frame and it pushes you towards the center. So it's literally his sword and his arm is a leading line from off frame to the focus, which is him. And they did center him up, or slightly off center him there. And they also put him up against this window, which creates this nice little frame around him instead of just putting kind of like an empty or not as interesting wall behind him. I think compositionally this is done well. I do believe that Tinkerbell is right here or somewhere nearby because there's that light source. So I believe that is what they're using, is Tinkerbell as the light source for Peter on his face.
It's closer than you think.
With this shot, you really see the fisheye look. And again, I don't know exactly what their choices were behind this, but this really shows it off because Big Ben is literally leaning. He's literally warped in this frame. And it could be because like they're getting ready to take off to Neverland. And so they want that look of like the world is bending as they're getting ready to fly super speed into Neverland. But Big Ben is literally warped and it gives that fisheye look. But I thought this frame was really cool because although we have interesting textures around our characters who are getting ready to fly off, although we have the color difference of this kind of greenish dark environment with the bright yellow Big Ben lights, but we actually get these little stars, where second star to the right and straight on till morning, we actually get like the surrounding galaxy stars. They start to look like little shooting stars, almost like in Star Wars where you jump into hyperspace. And that creates leading lines that basically shows where our characters are going towards. We're starting down here at the bottom of the frame and we're working up. So compositionally, it gives us leading room, and it also creates plenty of little hints of leading lines throughout the frame. So I thought it was interesting. You can literally see, because of these leading lines, the path that they're about to take. This shot is also fascinating because this is pretty simple. It's done beautifully. The colors are gorgeous. It looks like a canvas painting. Nothing's too overexposed like we had with the sun shot. You could still see the details. Wendy here pops off of the background very nicely, and it's a very soft, flattering light that just looks whimsical almost. And just like Peter with his sword off frame, creating a leading line to basically the subject, Wendy's arm is doing that also, and we see that a lot. They have like their extensions, like their appendages going off frame and leading you to the center, which is their reaction, which is their emotion, which is them communicating to the audience what the character is feeling. At the same time, you also get a little bit of a leading line with this arm as well. But I thought this is just a beautiful shot. I thought it looks great. The sky literally looks like a painting, and I like the use of the colors here. It feels very fresh. It feels new. It feels like early morning and straight onto morning, in fact. This was also really cool for a light source because the main light source for this frame is this window. I believe this is probably a flashback for Wendy. This is probably Mr. Darling here. And they're learning piano, but they have all these awesome lines because of the piano. And pianos are pretty easy to work with compositionally because there's a ton of interesting angles you can get with the piano. But I love that they chose this wider angle so you can see all the way down the piano, and it does create plenty of leading lines directly towards our characters. It's not super complex, but it's complex enough, and we still see, even though this big light source is behind them, we still see them in their shadows, and it's creating kind of like this soft, almost slightly leaking color or leaking kind of blur effect throughout the whole frame, which lends itself well to flashbacks especially.
Wendy, Moira, Angela, darling. Where is Peter Pan?
Similar to what we saw with Wendy earlier, we see an authority shot, which makes sense for this Captain Hook shot because Captain Hook is literally talking to someone and saying, "Where is Peter Pan?" Right? If we saw the trailer. So compositionally, he's centered up like we see many times already, and he's walking through this archway, so he's framed up naturally. But this is a very intense authority shot, and it's still keeping that wide look. And later on, it cuts to a close-up shot, but it's still that authority looking up shot. And I think it does well. Although it's a dark environment, these green walls, these off bluish green walls, like makes his red coat pop a little bit more. So I think that works well. I like the colors. I like compositionally how kind of gritty and dark and kind of scary this feels.
It's in your heart, but where you go from here, it's up to you.
This is another example of using the sun as a backlight behind them as the source for the light. So we have this light shining through the trees, and it's creating the main source of light for, I believe this is Tiger Lily here. Now we can still see all of her expression in the shadows there, but it's just simply using the golden hour sun as a backlight, and I like how it's shining through the trees to create kind of this broken up light. It just creates a good atmosphere, and all of the green, the lush feeling of the forest is nice. It's refreshing to look at. The last shot I have here is just simple. It's Peter Pan at night, and although we don't have a very clear picture of the moon, we know that the moon is up here because it's the brightest spot in the sky, and it's creating a nice motivated light on Peter here. We also have 3 layers of depth here. We have Peter here in the foreground, which is the focus. We see the whatever he's standing, this little environment he's standing, we see the edge of it here, which is our second layer, and then we see this beautiful mountainous landscape and sky in the background that has a lot of depth of field, so we don't get all of the textures, but we get the shadows and the textures of that. So we have 3 layers of depth here as well as motivated lighting. We got Peter on the third rule of thirds. This is just a very well put together but simple kind of 101 crafted compositional shot. So it just looks good. I think everything works together really well. Overall, I'm not mad at any of the cinematography that I'm seeing from this trailer. It looks beautiful. I mean, it looks really well done. There might be some about like certain animated moments that seems pretty obviously like it's CGI. However, the cinematography, I'm impressed. I like the style. I like the look. I think it's a fresh take on the Neverland world and what that imaginative ideas or the fresh ideas of what Neverland can look like is going to be interesting. It's going to be probably slightly more moody and slightly more I don't want to say gothic, but maybe mysterious might be a better word for it. I'm interested to see how they present it, and we'll see how the content and the writing goes as well for the story. But overall, the cinematography looks well done. I'm impressed by it, and I'm interested to see more when the next trailer comes out. So let me know what you thought in the comments below of the cinematography. If you want to leave a comment about what you thought about the trailer itself, we've given plenty of thoughts on that here on this channel and on our podcast, so you can go find those if you want. But I appreciate you watching. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video if you want to see more content like this. Really appreciate you watching, and go ahead and click through to the next recommended video that's going to be popping up right now.